Thank you very much. Okay, it's Monday the 11th of April 2022. Can I welcome you all to the remote cabinet meeting of the Vale Glamorgan Council. Can I remind everybody that this meeting is being live streamed and it will be recorded for further viewing and for posterity. First item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I've seen the people on my screen. I see there are none. So the next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. Is anybody prepared to accept them as a true record, please? I will formally move.
And I'll formally second, Leader.
Thank you very much. In that case, I will go to item 3, which is to receive declarations of interest, and I think we may have one or two. Councillor Ben Gray.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. In terms of agenda item discussing nursery provision in Penarth, agenda item 13 of today's meeting. As when this previously came to Cabinet, I declared I am a local authority governor at Evenlode Primary School in Penarth, which is related to part of the proposals in that respect. And as I did then, as a local authority governor, I have dispensation to speak and vote on matters, so I will be remaining in the meeting.
Thank you very much. And I think Councillor McCaffer.
Thank you very much, Leader. Similarly to Councillor Gray, I am a local authority governor on Evenlode, so yes, in relation to agenda item 13, just to make you all aware of that, I also have a dispensation from the Standards Committee to speak and will remain in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. If there are no others, I will go to the next item, which is item 4. It's a reference from the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. It is associated with also Agenda 8, which we will be taking later, and it's in relation to service plans and target setting to deliver the annual delivery plan. The report that went to that committee set out the future service plans and targets within the remit of that particular committee, as it has done for all the others too. They set out specific areas of focus associated with the delivery of the annual delivery plan, as aligned to the 4 corporate plan wellbeing objectives. Each service plan, so this is not just from this committee, but it's all of them, would contribute to delivering those corporate plan commitments and how they link to the forthcoming year's annual delivery plans. And indeed how they would utilise a range of resources, as well as the basis for monitoring and reporting within the forthcoming financial year. The annual delivery plan, as you know, is reflected in the service plans, which were attached to that particular item at Appendix 8 of their report, with again their service improvement plans, which are attached to Appendix B, in a similar way to they were to the other scrutiny committees. There wasn't also an Appendix C, which set out all planned activities as they related to the remit of the committee, and work was also underway to develop the national set of assessment performance measures. So subsequent to the reports, there were some comments, and there were comments in relation to things like, in light of the substantial detail of information contained within the documents, that members thought it might be beneficial for Scrutiny Committee, full Council, Cabinet, all members really to receive a presentation on the subject, which I think is probably a good idea because it is quite complicated, particularly as we go on into an election with brand new members. So, as I said, that was echoed by some other councillors, and it was suggested that something like that should take place. So basically, they suggested that because it was so complicated and convoluted, that it would be good to have a series of debates. Indeed, very similarly, or seminars, similar to the way we did treasury management lately. So basically, they recommended that the service plans be endorsed. They proposed that the service improvements be endorsed, but they also asked that the service plans and target settings to the annual delivery plan and additional complementary measures and means of scrutinise those are considered through a presentation. So I think that's perfectly adequate, to be honest. I think this is basically now for noting. We endorse that the work should be carried out to ensure a suitable presentation to all members. I think it would be better rather than a task and finish or whatever. I think it would be better for all members, and that should be considered to ensure that all members understood the work required in the annual delivery plan and through the service plans. So basically, at this stage, it's a matter for noting. They endorsed it. They made that suggestion, which I think is eminently sensible. So I would echo that and ask that officers take that on board, and that when the new members are brought in, that there is a series of seminars or deliveries for all members. I think I'd just simply move that if I could. I don't know if anybody agrees, or any comments, please.
No comments, Leader, but I will formally second.
Thank you. And I think that's left then to our officers to work with the forthcoming members. The next item is item 5, which is reports of meetings. In fact, it's item 5 and 6. It's the corporate parenting panel, 1st of the 10th of January, the 2nd of the 21st of March. And I think Councillor Ben Gray will take this as he chairs those meetings.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm sure we can take them together, but I would like to draw out some of the themes from each meeting separately to the attention of Cabinet.
Yes,
because
please.
Actually back in January, corporate parenting panel had an excellent presentation and discussion about some key principles we wanted to make sure were adopted within how we look after our children looked after. So we had a support for parents in and leaving care. So that's actually around those who've had a care experience, who are becoming parents, and trying to make sure that they're not stigmatised, and in how they're dealt with, there's not any assumptions made because they've ended up in care, that therefore there should be some sort of automatic assumption there's going to be a care requirement for their children. This was a charter around how we best do that, how we best work with them. It involved our Care Leavers Forum representative as well, and it was a very full and thorough conversation, and we went ahead and approved signing up to that charter, which is something which has been publicly shared, but I think something we should celebrate. In tandem with that was also this pledge as part of the National Youth Advocacy Service, the My Things Matter pledge. And I think it can be too often overlooked that there are little things that matter a great deal to people, and it's really important that those are treasured and people feel a sense of belonging over what they have. You know, someone might move from an emergency provision to a sort of a medium-term foster care provision, maybe to a longer-term outcome, and it's really important that we recognise the things that matter to those young people, and so it's listed in the minutes here, drawing out one of them. You know, we will help make sure we keep your most precious belongings with you safely during your move, and promise they will not be moved in bin bags. You know, it can be too simple to sort of say, well, grab the nearest thing, chuck it in, there you go, off you go. We need to be able to provide them with some dignity in how they are using our services and how we're looking after them. And so that was a really powerful conversation. It was great to hear from people who've experienced that in care. And I think it underlined just how much we care as a corporate parenting panel into what's happening to those children who are looked after. So I thought that was a really useful conversation. And the final one on that meeting, which was a really packed one, which I do want to sort of highlight in view of some commentary recently about the size of people in care and aims for why children are in care, is really our work around those who are at the edge of care, identifying those who may need some help to make sure they're not admitted to our care, and a wide range of information there. And that's actually across directorates. You know, it's not just a social services thing. You know, we need to identify issues right across education, and if people are coming into us through other means, or perhaps through housing, that they may come across issues and wish to report that back. So there was some really interesting stuff there, which members were really keen to highlight and understand what's going on. So I would commit and note those minutes. I don't know if anyone wants to say any comments on those. I know other members of the panel were there, but it was a really full conversation, and actually really underlined what we as a panel tried to do in sort of being a critical friend and working with all of the partners right across the council who are doing such great work for our children looked after. The second meeting, which is our most recent one, it wouldn't ordinarily come straight to Cabinet for sign off, but we thought it was really important that with the change of our administration coming up, that we rounded off and made sure the people who were in that panel were the ones involved with signing off those minutes. So I was given delegated authority by the panel to sign off the minutes and bring them straight to here. And this was a meeting from only a few weeks ago where we had a long item looking and reflecting on what we've achieved as a parenting panel, what things would be useful so we don't lose any momentum, that the new members who, they may all be the same members, it may be a whole new group of members, that we don't lose any momentum in what we're doing, because it is such a unique place to bring together that operational experience from different directorates in support of children looked after. So a really wide-ranging conversation. There were some points of clarification following recent scrutiny questions regarding children looked after, which will be got back to separately prior to any future meeting of the panel. But really a great reflection, and again underlining just how important all of our roles are, because all councillors are corporate parents, and the panel helps to discharge that duty on behalf of all of us. So with that in mind, I think you can be assured that they were two thorough meetings, really worthy of the title, and just wanted to note those Cabinet's approval, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, can I thank because there's 3 members of this cabinet who are on there. It's yourself, Catherine, and Eddie. And can I thank the amount of work that he put in there, apart from obviously the other members of the panel. I think it is interesting in relation to the first one you talked about educare delivery, because it is important that those ones who are just on the edge don't fall off. And if they can be picked up earlier, that's absolutely superb. And indeed, thank you for bringing the minutes of the 21st, because that does actually round everything off. And as you say, it's a big thank you to all those ones who've currently been on it, who may be on it in the future. But more particularly, it does allow seamless transition between the two as we've accepted these minutes. So can I?
It would be remiss of me not to also thank all the officers who contributed to the work of the panel, because it's the teams that look after the children looked after right across social services as well. 15+ team, everyone within education deals with those children looked after as well, and colleagues from housing and even from our HR department come along to make sure that we have as full a discussion as we can. And I think all they've done, and we've said it many times, the challenges of COVID as well, it's been astounding. So thank you. Thank you, Leader, for seconding that as well.
No, thank you. And I think it's important, because I think all councillors, particularly any new councillors coming in, have to realise that they do automatically become corporate parents, which is an important factor in the life of a councillor. So I'm happy to move forward. If anybody else wants to make any comments before I do. Nope. In that case, I will go to agenda item 7, which is at the annual delivery plan monitoring report Q3. It's something which we have on a very regular basis. The performance report presents our progress at Q3. It has contributed to an overall green status for the plan at, as I said, Q3. All 4 corporate plan wellbeing objectives were also attributed green performance, and that in this it talks about 91% of the planned activities have been attributed green, 2% amber, and 7% have a red status. And in terms of the red status, they were really a direct result of service reprioritisation in response to the pandemic. But clearly, where appropriate, work is now recommencing as part of the recovery plan, and members are requested to note the progress to date. In terms of 56% of the wellbeing objectives were also attributed a green performance, which I think is outstanding. 5% were amber and 39% were red. And again, a lot of that's down to the pandemic, which we've obviously been experiencing. Of the 16 measures attributable to red performance, I have to say that COVID-19 has contributed to 25% of them, in other words, for missing their targets. These have been to all the 4 scrutiny committees as reviewing as part of the Q4, and all have noted the performance and the coronavirus recovery status, and indeed the Corporate Performance Resources Committee, it says here, I did highlight a number of issues which are covered in this report in paragraph 2.22 on page 7, but I have to say that we've already dealt with those previously because we had a reference from that particular committee, so I'm not going to repeat that. As we all know, the Council Performance Framework is a mechanism through which our key priorities are monitored, and as I said, we have been quite successful, I think, in meeting those and having a green status. But one of the things we also need to use it for is to secure continuous improvement and meet our performance requirements. And that's reflected in the requirements of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and identified the 4 wellbeing objectives of the Council. And indeed, that performance is aligned to our corporate plan. And as I say, it's reported on a quarterly basis and it's been to each of the scrutiny committees. But work will clearly continue, and we need to develop and enhance our performance monitoring arrangements. Appendix A to the report does outline the performance for the quarter against the delivery plan. It does have various sections to it. The first section talks about the overall RAG status, as I mentioned, green. Sections 2 to 5 provides an overview of the progress of each of the 4 corporate planned objectives, and it actually brings it together with a performance snapshot. It highlights performance exceptions, and it does provide appendices that can be addressed in terms of detail. Then the final section, section 6, provides a link to the 5 presentations to all scrutiny committees, and as I said, outlined earlier, the key issues are that it was a green status. All 5 scrutiny committees have had their reports, and they've all noted the reports. I've made a comment in relation to paragraph 2.22 because that related to something which we dealt with before, and I don't intend to deal with it again. So basically, this is a report which is part of the normal process. It's the 3rd quarter, and I'm asking that what the recommendations are that Cabinet consider the results. So if anybody's got any comments to make, please come forward. And our progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan, that we consider the views of the scrutiny committees, which we have because they've all noted those issues, and that we, as a Cabinet, note the progress being made through the recovery strategy in response to the ongoing coronavirus. So I think that we will note the current position and also note the ongoing response in relation to the recovery plan. I don't know if everybody got any comments to make in relation to their own areas. This is a bit of housekeeping in some respects, which we have on a regular basis, and I'm really pleased that we're still within the green category. Don't know if anybody's got any comments to make. In that case, I will move the recommendation. Eddie, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, sorry for being slow to respond there. Yeah, I think it's just a recognition that, you know, when you highlight some reds, that tends to be the focus. But when you look underneath, when you look at the number of activities that are involved with all that, we're in a good place, aren't we? It's with all the context of what's happened over the last year and the year before. There are some things we can all improve on, but clearly we're going in the right direction. That's what the report says. So I'm concur with what you've moved. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eddie. In that case, if everybody's in agreement, I will move on. The next item is, again, we dealt with some of this in relation to Agenda 4, which is the service plans and targets set in delivery for the year 22-23. This does represent our service plans and associated improvements for 22-23. The specific areas of focus are aligned to the corporate plan and wellbeing objectives, and within the context of the Council's recovery strategy. The annual delivery plan will help to meet our statutory obligations, which place specific duties on the Council. And by continually reviewing the relevance of the wellbeing objectives, we can be assured that our associated commitments outlined in the annual delivery plan are relevant in delivery improved outcomes, and that they contribute to the national wellbeing goals. Again, in relation to this, all scrutiny committees have considered their service plans. The one we highlighted before was from corporate performance, and they have all endorsed those. So Cabinet are now asked to review and approve the service plans and service improvements for 22-23. And by approving these service plans and service improvements, this will enable the council to fully discharge its statutory duty to set and publish its wellbeing objectives and outlines, and how it would propose to meet those objectives in year. So progress against the delivery plan, as I said, will also continue to be monitored quarterly, as we just looked at, in line with the corporate performance monitoring arrangements, and will inform our annual self-assessment findings. In terms of, as I said, the annual delivery plan does meet our statutory obligations, and the plan was actually endorsed by full council on the 7th of March. So we can move forward, which is the reason we have the service delivery plans. They are the building blocks of its performance management, and they are reviewed annually to ensure that we have continual improvement and performance, and our monitoring will continue. We have considered, as I said, the annual delivery plan at full council, and the service plans have been considered since council, and as I reported earlier, all the scrutiny committees have endorsed them. An Appendix A to the service plans for all the council services outline how each will contribute to the corporate plan wellbeing objectives, and to further assist, Cabinet members are asked to consider the service plans at Appendix C, which contains all the service plans contributions to our corporate plan commitments, reflecting the cross-cutting and integrated nature of our corporate plan wellbeing objectives. There are some mitigating factors highlighted, and they include risks on things like customer focus, resources, workforce, finance, ICT and assets. But clearly, once we agree these, all the 14 service areas will then develop their team plans for 22-23, which will underpin those service delivery plans. In terms of the draft service priorities for shared regulatory services are concerned, that actually will be finalised as part of the joint business planning process for the shared regulatory services organisation. And their final business plan will be reported to the Regulatory Services Joint Committee, the relevant scrutiny committee, and indeed Cabinet by the end of June, in line with the delegation of the joint working agreement. So basically, Cabinet have been asked to review and approve all the service plans as contained in details in Appendix A to C. There is work in terms of the report, in terms of the service improvement targets, and all the targets are accompanied by a rationale, and each year is undertaken, which is what we do in year to ensure a balanced assessment of performance. There are some clearly some statutory obligations, and some of those were suspended indefinitely at the end of 2019 at the height of the pandemic, but therefore benchmarking data was not actually available at the time of setting these targets. But consequently, proposed targets for the public accountability measures have been based on local performance trends and data and service knowledge of other council performances. Data Cymru has also commenced a project to develop a national database to inform the self-assessment process, which is something we have to do as we go forward. Now we will have a self-assessment process. They will provide significant data, which is needed to effectively assess our performance locally and indeed nationally. So in light of the above, the corporate performance measures have been reviewed. There's a rationale of suites put in place. Appendix B outlines the proposed performance, and indeed I've highlighted the fact that the scrutiny committees have seen all those recommendations and approved them. So basically it is for Cabinet to review and approve the service plans at Appendix A, and I would mention that Appendix C 2, because that's not within the current recommendations. That has been highlighted in paragraph 2.14, I think. So basically, we're asked to look at that to consider all the primary documents against which performance of the annual delivery plan is based and monitored, and that we approve the proposed service improvement targets too, which are covered in Appendix B. So I will formally move that we will endorse and approve the service plans at Appendix A and C, and the service improvement targets at Appendix B. I've rambled on a bit, but I think it's important that everybody understands where this all sits within the scheme of things. I don't know if anybody's got any comments to make.
Yes, Leader, I have. A very sort of broad brush topic in terms of, these are really challenging service plans. Is no sort of resting on laurels of the performance that we've just seen of the last year. Very ambitious. And also, if you look at the sort of cross-cutting theme of climate emergency as well, and there's a tremendous amount of work going on that. So I think that coupling that in with the quarter 3 monitoring report, obviously we've gone past quarter 4 now to see what we have achieved and what we want to go in the future, provides a very good overview of what this council is aiming to do, and I'm absolutely delighted to second it. I think I also should note that as far as I'm aware, all cabinet members were present at their scrutiny committees to discuss these when they were going through, as well as originally signing them off. So there has been a tremendous amount of discussion about these service plans going forward. So I said delighted to second them.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Deputy Leader. I think it's absolutely right, and there's something that perhaps we don't highlight enough, is that these service plans have all been signed off by yourselves as part of the cabinet, but it's also been to those scrutiny committees and now done in great deal of in-depth consideration. So, in some respects, what we've done today is an overview more than anything else, rather than a full in-depth review of the service plans. But clearly, when you look at our the way that we continue to work and having a green status of those things, particularly through the pandemic, I think everybody needs to be congratulated. And I'm absolutely convinced that the service plans going forward will ensure that we continue that on that basis. So can I thank you all, and thank all the officers for the amount of work they put into this. If there's nothing else, can I move forward? I'll move forward. Thank you. The next item is item 9, which is the use of the Chief Executive's urgency powers. And again, this is an updated report, a regular housekeeping report, where we report, or the Chief Executive reports the emergency powers is used. And this is highlighted because they're all there, but things like, for example, the education program, capital program continues, and it means that we take the decisions quickly so that the work can go ahead within this financial year and as soon as practical. Things like also highlighted by many was the CCTV, and this also we did it through the purchasing of the equipment to upgrade and improve the CCTV system. Now that we've come to an agreement with the Police and Crime Commissioner and the police. In terms of the pandemic, that's ongoing. We're still block booking rooms in hotel rooms for those people who were homeless. It also talks about things like the neighbourhood services highway improvements, where we've continued to maintain the existing highway network and in fact increased the amount of work that we carried out in the highway improvements and increased the budget, in this case by £500,000. And also looked to purchase electronic vehicles, which also go towards looking at our carbon footprint and things going forward. And coupled with that is the waste transfer station agreement, so that we can continue to do that until the Atlantic Trading Estate is developed. They are before you. I highlight those because I think they're important that people understand why you use them, and why it is important to make sure that we get things done as quickly as possible. But also be assured that the Managing Director, the Chief Executive as he is now, was also passed these by the relevant cabinet members and myself. So I'm going to formally move those recommendations, and if anybody wants to highlight any of them in particular, I know I have some, and I think they're important to highlight. Catherine.
Thank you, Leader. I mean, I was just going to reiterate exactly what you said, which is there's a reason these things are emergency powers. But from like my cabinet portfolio point of view, I'm really excited about the money that's going to come to rebuild the skate park in the NAF. That's such good news for everybody in the Vale. Also, the information in relation to Belby Pavilion, which is a much needed community facility that's going to be in Penarth. And then about the replacement of the pitch in Jenner Park, which means we'll have a much better facility available to more members of our community. So, like you said, it just allows us to be able to move forward with all of these things in a timely fashion to get everything ready for everybody else. So thank you for that.
Good, thank you. I agree. Liz.
Sorry, I just thought that I'd mention the continuing success, if success is the right word, I have to say, of Big Box Boyd. And this was an initiative that was developed by one of our primary schools in Cadixton and shared with another one of our primary schools in Oakfield, which provides support in terms of pay-as-you-can food provision, but also other support. This growing space and everything has been so successful that it has spread out across South Wales. And I actually heard, I say South Wales, I used to think South East Wales or whatever. I heard the other day there's one in the Neath Valleys. And this is, you know, it's awful. It's absolutely awful that these provisions are needed. But the impact that one primary school in Barry has had on people's ability to cope with the financial pressures that are on them at the moment is absolutely phenomenal. So, you know, I do think that has to be mentioned, and also our thanks go to them for all their work, all their outreach work out into their community and out into the wider Welsh community. So I'd just like to mention that, and obviously I would also like to second the report.
Good, thank you very much. In that case, I will move on to the next item, which is unacceptable actions by citizens and social media policies. This is nothing new, but it's an update, really, more than anything else. The policy on unacceptable actions by citizens is appended at Appendix 1, and it does set out the council's approach to those whose actions or behaviour against staff and councillors are considered unacceptable. The term citizen includes any person who contacts the council or acts on behalf of another individual in doing so, and any complainant and any person who requests council information. The policy does build, as I said, and expands on and replaces the current unreasonable complaints policy. The policy does recognise the opportunity for interaction with the council and its officers, and it is multiplying exponentially with the increasing popularity of social media. So that's the reason that social media has been included into this. Because communication is quick and easy, but can become intrusive and difficult to manage, particularly both professionally and private, and giving up some private profiles which are highlighted, but more particularly, people do expect an instant answer when that is not always possible for many reasons. It does define the actions of individuals who are angry, demanding, or persistent to the extent that they result in unreasonable demands on the council or unacceptable behaviour towards staff and indeed councillors. The policy expectations and provides guidance on how to communicate with our clients and options remedies along with the defined processes to progress actions and responses where they are transgression. The policy sets out internal processes for managing it, and including guidance for chief officers. As I said, we've also included in this time the social media policy, and that's at Appendix 2, and that sets out how the council uses this media to help people keep informed about the services and events that are important to them, as well as to share and promote the work of the organisation. They also work to ask for views or feedback on certain topics, such as consultations. But what the policy does set out is what citizens can expect from the council when interacting on social media, and the way accounts are updated and monitored. And the policy also sets out the council's what the council expects from those interacting with the organisation via social media. So this is consistent with the unacceptable actions by citizens policy, and provides a social media interaction to this. As I said, we have had a previous policy in place. Fewer than 5 individuals actually been subject to the policy, but opportunities for interaction with the council have multiplied since we've taken on social media. And citizens do have the capacity to make what are considered to be unreasonable demands through the amount of information they seek. I know there is things in relation to freedom of information, but this goes outside of that scope. It also talks about the potential impact and the work on the council, and in the event this will informal attempts to resolve the concerns and then they're not resolved, then this is a policy and process is required to support staff and ensure the services provided to other citizens are protected. It talks about in the report, it talks about things like the proposed policy does fairly honestly, consistently and appropriate and work appropriately with citizens. And you know, the services must be accessible to all citizens, but it also provides the right to restrict or change access to the council, its services or its staff where it's necessary. And as I said, it's not something that has been used extensively, but it is there as a tool, because the council does recognise the need for the policy, and it needs to be fair and transparent, and it's not applied inappropriately. And indeed, it is overseen by at least 3 council officers. And if anybody is subject to the policy, then that is reviewed at least every 6 months, and any action that's taken or not, or whatever consideration is deemed necessary is related to those individuals themselves. So that sometimes what happens is that people are asked just to deal with one person within the council. So there is one point of contact, because sometimes people contact a multitude of people, and a multitude of people get emails and traffic, and therefore everybody is doing the same thing, where in fact, if it seems to be reasonable, it should be done through one contact. In terms of the social media, we know that we use Facebook, Twitter, YouTube and LinkedIn. And as I said, the social media policy is on Appendix 2, and it does set out that purpose. Once approved, the social media policy will be published on the council's website. So the report seeks cabinet approval for those 2 appendices and those policies. So the recommendations are that the cabinet endorses or considers the contents of the report, that the cabinet approve the unacceptable actions by citizens policy, which is in Appendix 1, and the social media policy at Appendix 2. But it will be subject to consideration by the Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Performance and Resources, via referral to that committee. And indeed, we are asking that committee to deal with it this week. And then the third one would be that, subject to the recommendations 1 and 2, Cabinet on the 25th of April, so that's our last Cabinet, the next one, considered any comments from Scrutiny Committee, Corporate Performance and Resources, which will be held on the 14th of this month, and provided final approval for the contents of the policy of the report and the policy at Appendix 1 and 2. But should the scrutiny committee, and I think this is important really, is should the scrutiny committee make no further comments, Cabinet would consider that the report and policies at Appendix 1 and 2 as endorsed, as agreed. So in other words, we think this is the right policy, we will endorse it, we will send it to scrutiny for their consideration. If in fact they make no consideration or they accept the policy, then it automatically becomes enacted, and it can go on the website as soon as possible. I have been subject to some of these myself, and I think it is something that we need in place to protect ourselves and more particularly our staff from any unwarranted attacks or unreasonable consideration. Liz.
Thank you, Leader. I totally agree with the policy, and I'll be interested to hear what scrutiny's views are of it when it goes there. And I think you were right to say that the number of people that this has actually affected is very, very small. And the vast majority of people, we're going to discuss the public participation strategy shortly. The vast majority of people, we deal with are absolutely, brilliant, very reasonable, and are on the same line as us in terms of just wanting to improve public services. And as I quite often say to people, please don't ever worry about reporting a streetlight out or a pothole or something, because actually that saves us time going to search for them. So I don't want people to think that just by saying something's wrong or making a suggestion or making a contribution that they will come under this policy. This is for those very small number of people who take disproportionate and unacceptable amounts of council resource with complaints and who are abusive. And for those, they have to be dealt with, but for the vast majority of the people that we deal with day in, day out, they're an absolute delight. So this is not for them, and I wouldn't want anybody to feel that they should hold back from telling us when they have concerns or suggestions. And no. Very happy to support and second this report.
Thank you, Liz. Ben, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it was just to reflect on and agree with what Liz has just said. I think for most engaged people who care about what the council does, which hopefully is everybody, but for even those that regularly comment and are perhaps at odds with our political stance, none of this applies to them. I'm a portfolio holder in an area, social services, which can generate some significantly emotional responses to scenarios, and even our most agitated of political respondents cannot even imagine the sort of activities that this policy is seeking to address, and the stuff which our staff have to deal with in running and doing their jobs. And so it is absolutely right that we have these policies in place, that we provide an environment in which people can work safely. And I would happily encourage any debate. I'm an elected member. I'm here to be judged, and I'm happy to have that conversation. And clearly there are the occasional times where that gets too far, and that's all laid out in the report. We don't need to go into that in great detail. But this is also about staff as well. And I think other working environments will have this in place, and it's absolutely right and proper as a council that we make sure our staff are protected. And I thought it was important with the portfolio that I oversee that I made that point clear to anyone listening. This isn't about stifling any kind of reasonable debate at all. And we can have a conversation about public participation in our next agenda item. It is about those, as we've described, really minority cases which fall way outside what anyone would describe as reasonable attitude or behaviour from individuals.
Yeah, I agree. This is not a gagging order. It's never been considered to be a gagging order. It allows people to to have their disagreement. People can disagree with me as much as they want to, but they should do so reasonably and not be particularly overzealous or particularly rude or make unjustified comments. But if they continue to do that, and they're doing it to some officers, and I know some experiences of people will make a complaint and they say, well, this is what I think's right, and you come back and you give them an explanation and they say, well, disagree with you, and they'll keep on going back and say, I disagree with you and disagree with you. But the point becomes the fact that if something is, you can do something, you'll do something. Sometimes there's something we can't do because it's illegal to do it. Like, you know, so sometimes there is a line that sometimes is crossed. What this does is give our officers an opportunity to say, look, this is the situation. If this continues, then we will have to consider invoking this procedure. And as I said, I'm aware of personally 2 areas that this happened, and in the report it says that 5 in the time it's been in existence, and that's a long time, because I remember this coming in originally. But clearly what's happening now is with social media, things are that much more instant. People expect a response immediately. They don't expect the fact that somebody can't pick up their emails at the drop of a hat, so that you send it in and expect it right away. And sometimes people will not accept that, and that's unreasonable too. But the point is, this is a tool and nothing more than that. It isn't something to gag anybody. It's a tool to ensure that our officers can carry on in a reasonable manner and carry out their job as best they can. So, I've gone on too much, sorry. But I think it's reasonable. As I said, it's an update on where we are, particularly in terms of social media. Okay, and then I will move on, and I will move on to the next one, which is the public participation strategy. And I will apologise in advance, is that I am going to say quite a bit about this, because one of the things that's happened is that we've had to revise some of it anyway, due to the fact that there's have to be some amendments and some increases due in some part to Welsh Government, to be honest. But what this report does seek the endorsement of the updated public participation strategy, and it does follow a public consultation and the publication of the draft Welsh guidance. As a council, we just said we're committed to engaging with residents and other key stakeholders in decision making. We're working with and for our communities is one of the 4 wellbeing objectives set out in the corporate plan anyway. And as I said, the council has previously published a public engagement framework. It's also the case that the Local Government and Election Wales Act established a duty to encourage local people to participate in decision making, and a requirement that local authorities publish, consult on, and regularly review a public participation strategy. And this is what we're currently doing. The Act does stipulate strategy must address promoting awareness of council functions, promoting awareness of how to become a councillor, which is very relevant at the moment, facilitating access to decisions made or to be made, promoting and facilitating process for the local people to make representations to the councils about a decision. And in order to set out and to improve the public participation strategy and to ensure the council does meet its statutory requirements, a draft public participation strategy has been produced. It was consulted between January and March, and in March, in some respects, I can understand, but it also causes issues. The draft statutory guidance on public participation strategy was published by Welsh Government. This was in March. Clearly, we put ours together and consulted during January to March. So the draft strategy has now been amended to reflect responses to the consultation, as you would expect, the findings of the Equality Impact Assessment, and indeed the draft statutory guidance from Welsh Government. So this is now coming to Cabinet for endorsement. Apart from the duties already mentioned, the Act sets out a number of areas the council's participation strategy must address. As I said, those ones which I've set out before, but it also must also cover arrangements for bringing views of the public to the attention of the overview and scrutiny committees, which I hope we do anyway, and promote awareness among councillors of the benefits. I think it should also say disbenefits, personally, of using social media. There are a number of other requirements not included in the draft strategy, the duty to publish a petition scheme and a duty to publish electronic and postal addresses for each councillor. The Cabinet will note the report considers has been considered previously with this regard and is referenced in the background papers. But it's also a case that we have to publish a participation strategy as soon as practicable after the local government elections in May. Now, I thought we were on track for doing that, I have to say. But Cabinet considered it in January. We consulted on it, and we did actually could only do it because of the coronavirus online. It also went to the scrutiny committees, but then Welsh Government published a draft on producing the public participation strategy on the 17th of March. So they now Welsh Government have got this draft guidance out, and indeed they are out to consultation, which runs to the 22nd of July. And there's yet no indication date for the publication of the final guidance by Welsh Government. So Cabinet needs to note that the draft guideline is as soon the Cabinet will note the prescribed timeline for the Council to publish this is as soon as practical after the local government elections in May. So the proposed responses to the consultation on this guidance will be reported to Cabinet in due course. In other words, we've gone down the road of having a public participation strategy. We've consulted on it. Welsh Government have come up with their own and are also consulting on it. What is promising is our consultation results demonstrated a strong support for the actions proposed in almost all cases, and the full report on the consultation is set out in Appendix A. As I said, the Welsh Government have now issued this draft guidance, and the guidance is designed to support councils in the preparation and maintenance of their public participation strategies. And indeed, the consultation document includes a draft statutory guidance, and that can be found in Appendix B. So the revised, and this is where I'm going to have to go on, I'm afraid, because it is important that we cover it. So now the revised public participation strategy is being informed by the responses, discussions at Cabinet and at scrutiny committees, as I said, the equal impact assessment, and indeed now the Welsh Government's draft guidance. So there have been amendments made, and I'm afraid I will go through them. So an added emphasis on the importance of better communicating how and when people can influence decisions, particularly at council meetings. So there will always be a non-digital route for people to participate. There'll be a wide-ranging campaign will be needed. And this must go beyond the simple promotion of these as methods of responses during the specific projects. It does bring together all the consultation, engagement and participation together into a single, easily accessible online hub, and the development of a portal that joins together all these pathways for participation will need to be addressed. There needs to be recognition that not all current participation activities are fully accessible to all groups and protected characteristics. And I think this is the added bit as well. The additional action to develop independent advocacy groups with protected characteristics. There's also an additional action to develop better guidance on how to produce documents that are accessible to those with protected characteristics and generally easier for stakeholders to understand. This also needs to have correct language when talking about participation within terms of that. There's also additional action to develop a communication plan template for reports. There's also an addition action to strengthen the link between the Council's customer contact platforms so that all ad hoc feedback and pertinent questions can be captured and responded to. There's also an addition action to develop methods of better brief and engagement with councillors to work better as advocates for both the residents and the council. There's also needs to be a recognition that the council must work with a wide range of community groups, like those with characteristics, an additional action plan for these groups and their community links, and develop plans to support them. And the final draft public participation strategy is set out in Appendix C. Now, this report seeks our endorsement of this final draft, subject, again, this has to go to reference to the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee on the 14th of April this week. And the prescribed date for the publishing of the first public partition strategy should be as soon as reasonable after the 5th of May. Therefore, upon endorsement by Cabinet, and may have to come back to the Cabinet in a fortnight's time, it's intended to publish the final version of the Council's public participation strategy as appended to this report as soon as practicable after the 5th of May, and the first published strategy will then be reviewed and amended as necessary in line with the final statutory guidance and discretion come from Welsh Government once that comes forward. However, there is no current indicated timeline for this. So it is a bit of a working document. It is going to have to be a live document. And there are recommendations which you can see. The 4 recommendations is that the Cabinet note the results of the public consultation, that's Appendix A, that we note the draft statutory guidance published by Welsh Government in March as set out in Appendix B, and indeed the Equality Impact Assessment and Appendix D, and that the Cabinet endorses the amended public participation strategy, that's the final one, at Appendix C, subject to it being referred to the Scrutiny Committee on the 14th of April. And in a similar way that we did before, that if necessary, Cabinet will deal with it on the 25th of April to consider any comments from Scrutiny Committee, but in the absence of any such comments from the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee, the Cabinet agrees that the strategy be endorsed and published in line with the timescales set out in the report. So in other words, it wouldn't need to come back to us if there are no changes. I'm sorry I've gone through that in detail, but the fact that the Welsh Government has come up with a draft, which is in essence after we've finished our consultation, means that we have a live document on our hands, and again it has to be published as soon as possible after the 5th of May. I apologise for ranting on. I'm going to formally move those. I don't know if anybody's got any comments to make.
No, happy to formally second, Leader.
Good. I did your heading. Okay, all right, thank you very much. The next item is item 12, which is the Escola Derry Expansion Acceptance of Tender, which is a Part 1 report. I forward to the Deputy Leader, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, this is the Part 1 report, and we will subsequently discuss a Part 2 report in relation to this. So as Cabinet will be aware that back in July 2019, Cabinet approved the revised Band B 21st Century Schools programme, which is now the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, which it included the Escola Derry expansion. So tenders were recently sought using the South East Wales Schools and Capital Funding, and that's known as SUSCAP contractor framework under Lot 9, and they've been subsequently evaluated by the Vale of Glamorgan Council and the multidisciplinary consultancy that we use, ACOM, in accordance with the criteria stated in the tender documentation. The further details of the evaluation are in the Part 2 item on this agenda. So the recommendations for the Part 1 report are that the Cabinet notes this report and recommendations considered in connection with the Part 2 report later in the agenda, and 2, that use of the urgent decision procedure as set out in section 1414 of the Council's Constitution is exercised in connection with the Part 2 report later in the agenda. So I so move, and we can discuss that more fully in the Part 2 because it's commercially confidential.
Okay, I formally second that and can come to it at Part 2. So the next item is item 13, which is proposal to reconfigure nursery provision in Penarth. And again, Deputy Leader, Cabinet Member for Education and Regeneration, please.
Thank you, Leader. I will just move stuff around because I've got this on the other monitor. Yes, this is to advise Cabinet of the outcome of the statutory notice to reconfigure nursery provision in Penarth and the process to be followed to allow a determination to be made, because as said, as you know, this is now the 3rd time that this has been discussed by Cabinet. Firstly, before we launched the first consultation, then at the end of that consultation and going into statutory notice, and now that we are coming to the end of that statutory notice period. It's also twice been discussed at length in cross-party scrutiny, and on both occasions it has been supported by Scrutiny Committee. It's been a challenging discussion, dominated by very many factual inaccuracies that have caused major upset and concern within the local community. I mean, even necessitating the need for an apology from the scrutiny chair at a subsequent meeting. It's become a political football, which things can often be this close to an election. But that's unfortunate, and so it falls to me to present this report to Cabinet to make a decision based on facts and on evidence. And I think it needs to be said right at the start of this report, very, very plainly, that whatever the decision today, the nurseries will continue to operate from their existing locations, as has been stated at every stage of the process. It has never been in doubt that the nurseries will continue to operate from their current sites. So, colleagues, we're discussing 2 proposals that, while different, they are broadly similar. And this is where we get into the sort of the jargon of legalese in terms of education that we always have to go through. And so, the proposal 1, we're talking about reconfiguring nursery provision in Penarth by proposal 1 is amalgamating Bute Cottage Nursery School and Evenlode Primary School. And in order to do that, we need to create one entity, and that means that the capacity of Evenlode Primary School expands to accommodate the 96 part-time nursery places that are in Bute Cottage, and then discontinuing the entity of Bute Cottage and transferring all staff and pupils under the governance, and that is the very, very important phase, under the governance of Evenlode Primary School from September 2022. It will stay in exactly the same place. And then the second proposal is to amalgamate Cogan Nursery School and Cogan Primary School, and again expanding Cogan Primary School to age 4 to from starting age 4 to starting age 3, and including the 96 part-time nursery places within their structure. But that still means that Cogan Nursery stays in exactly the same location with the same children, the same staff, and operating in the same way from September 2022. So in this current consultation, Council received 111 objections by the closing date of the 19th of March and they've been categorised under a number of themes which I'll go into more. The report, the objections report, can be found at Appendix A. So going through the report, first of all, section 1 is the background of how we got to today, and that's all those various meetings and the various consultations and the findings. And then the section 2 goes through what we're trying to achieve and the objections, and I will go through those, and if you bear with me, I will move on to the other half of my monitor in order to go through those. I think it's fair to say that all councillors have had copies of the objections, so they can look at them in great detail. Obviously they are confidential, you wouldn't share those publicly, but all councillors have had sight of those. There was one, it says local member objection, but it's not actually a local member. The leader of the Conservative group who objected, and mainly objecting on the fact that the majority of responses had objected, but as we discussed at the last cabinet meeting, the vast majority of objections were based on the nursery's moving site, which they're not. But I think it needs to be said that a statutory consultation is not a referendum. It is how we consult to see whether or not the proposal to implement council policy is actually relevant in this situation. So if I scroll down, there are a number of different objection themes. First of all, it says about the loss of nursery school, and they said that they were concerned about the disadvantages associated with loss of dedicated head teachers and staff. Again, I can say that, staff, location, children will all remain the same, and I think it needs to also be said that the majority of ESTIN reports for the primary schools in the Vale of Glamorgan offering nursery provision have scored a good or excellent ranking, ranking within within their reports, demonstrating that the 13 to 11 model hasn't resulted in poorer learning outcomes for children attending this type of school. And as I said, existing staff will transfer to the amalgamated schools, and that's to the school as an entity, not as a location, ensuring continuity in provision. Objection 2, a theme was loss of tailored nursery provision. And again, this proposal would have the advantage of reflecting on sharing and benefiting from the best practice in both the nursery and primary sectors. And foundation phases are actually nursery and years 1 and 2, so that allows sharing of good practice across those. Objection 3 was the cost savings are insufficient to warrant the proposal. In the consultation document, it actually set out the rationale behind the proposals and the several drivers for it. However, the main driver for the proposals is to do with equality and consistency across primary provision, and any cost savings are separate to that. So that wasn't a primary driver for it. Objection 4, current relationships between schools are appropriate and would not benefit from a change in structure. Well, whilst the council agrees that there are good working relationships and that's to be applauded, there would still be opportunities for greater collaboration, streamlining of communications between the schools and with parents. Theme 5 was an inappropriate setting for nursery pupils. And there were 10 respondents who raised concerns that nursery pupils would be overwhelmed in a setting with primary school pupils and part of a larger school. That wouldn't be an issue because both schools, or neither nursery school is moving. Neither nursery school will be on site with the primary school. Objection theme 6 was objecting to say that the majority of consultees propose the proposals. And I think we recognise that, but as I stated before, is looking at the majority of the objections actually relate to incorrect information, and that is a concern. And I think that, you know, when we looked at the public participation strategy earlier, we have to look at how we can try and stop disinformation becoming dominant within consultations. But as I said, looking at that situation, that is, you know, that is difficult when people are concerned about something happening within a consultation that's actually not happening. Objection theme 7, no clear rationale for proposal. Well, the rationales have been laid out in the consultation document, and the consultation document, and we and have been stated on each occasion. If there is a view that they are not clear, then you know, they're available to be read. Insufficient resources, that's objection theme 8, insufficient resources to maintain quality of education. Should the proposal be implemented following today's meeting, Evenlode Primary School and Cogan Primary School would each receive an individual budget, which would include allocations for the nursery phase. And, you know, as the majority of school funding is based on the number of pupils on roll, the proposals would improve the overall budget position of both primary schools. So, you know, there would be no difference in allocation for the funding for nursery pupils. Objection theme 9, consultation process is inadequate. Well, it is completely in line with the School Standards and Organisation Wales Act 2013 and the guidance provided within the School Organisation Code 2018. And the council must undertake the process in accordance with these documents to ensure it's valid. And so that is the way that the process runs. That has been laid out ahead of Cabinet, and as I said, it's actually on top of everything else, been to scrutiny, an extra time for discussion. Objection theme 10 was loss of outdoor space. Well, there would be exactly the same outdoor space because they're not moving. Increased school traffic. There were concerns on school traffic, but they're not moving, so there would be no difference to the school traffic. Changes in catchment area are detrimental to local residents. The catchments for the nursery schools are coterminous with the 2 primary schools which do not have nursery schools. And as no proposals have been presented to relocate either nursery school, you know, they would still feature serving those, because every other primary school in Penarth has a nursery school. So pupils would obviously be prioritised to attend those schools. The Cogan one from Cogan Primary catchment area and Butte Cottage from children that are within the Evenlode catchment area. But if they're not full after that, then children from other areas can always apply. Objection theme 13 is proposal would result in shared school site in long term. No proposals have been presented to relocate either nursery school. Therefore, no rationale is included within this consultation document, within the consultation document, and the proposal is to keep both nursery schools on their current site. Further, as all this has been going on, the feasibility study was undertaken, and as you'll see in paragraph 4.3 of the report, that the Council School Investment Programme Board determined that the project to relocate Bute Cottage would not be feasible, and so consequently the council is actually seeking approval from Welsh Government to remove the project from the overall school investment programme and use the 1.3 million that was allocated as part of the Sustainable Communities funding to be used elsewhere in the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, to allow funding to be focused on other ongoing projects in the programme. So we're looking through those. Actually, I've just missed a couple. This the ones related, sorry, to the proposal to Cogan Nursery School and Primary School, and there was one talking about objection 14 was about 11 people concerned about transition of arrangements between nursery and primary, and they felt they wouldn't result in better transition. And the response there is that the council is admission authority for nursery and primary school, and the nursery school doesn't have a catchment area, but it does prioritise places based upon the catchment area of Cogan Primary School, and they've always worked very closely together. Objection 15 was that Cogan Nursery takes pupils from beyond Cogan catchment area. Well, that wouldn't change, it's just that it would be prioritised for the Cogan Primary School, and if there were spare places they could take children from outside the catchment area. So looking at that, I'm sorry that I've gone through it in length again. Overall, it's felt that to proceed with the amalgamation of Bute Cottage and Evenlode Primary School and Cogan Nursery and Cogan Primary is the correct way forward, and I have some recommendations before me, but I was just wondering, I see that a few people have their hands up who would like to speak before I do so. So I think the first one is Ben.
Ben was first, and then Peter comes next.
Thank you, Liz. I'll give you a moment to take some water, maybe ahead of listing out the recommendations. And thank you for laying out how the objections have been dealt with in the report. And I think it seeks to underline the issues that dealt with in those conversations. Whilst the public may not have seen any staged pictures of myself either outside Bute Cottage or Cogan Nursery School, I can assure you I've taken an active interest in this, alongside reading all the documentation attached to the reports on the matter, and indeed, as being reflected now by yourself, Liz, as a local ward member with residents who send their kids to Bute Cottage Nursery, I've taken the time to meet with key people there and have a tour round. During my tour, with amongst others, the Chair of Governors and acting head teacher, I had full and frank conversations with them about the learning environment at Bute and their passion for the current activities the children are engaged with. There are dedicated individuals delivering a great environment at the Bute site, which should absolutely continue to be the standard which parents can expect from nursery provision going forwards. Whilst there, I stated to them I did not see that a change of governance would have any detrimental effect on the learning environment that I observed in my visit, as provision would not be moving. The children are not moving site, and indeed the strong feelings that I've previously stated and continue to have, I would oppose any proposals to close the Bute Cottage site in the future. I'd also further note that the only communication I've ever received from parents of prospective pupils in respect of Evenlode have been of a positive nature, with them in the most part being keen to make sure their children can get into Evenlode due to its high standards, which further assures me of a positive future for nursery provision on the Bute Cottage site. You've not gone through the recommendations yet, but I think a lot of the themes have been discussed at length in previous reports, at the 2 scrutiny meetings you refer to. And I think that it's important for everybody to understand what's going to happen in September. And so I think that the governance for these nursery schools being moved in terms of how they're overseen to these sites, primary schools, I think it's the right approach. But obviously, I'll wait for you to list out the recommendations. I may come back in, Leader.
Get myself off mute. Peter, come in, please.
I've unmuted myself. Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Deputy. I'd like to pick up a couple of the points that the Deputy Leader took us through and picked up upon, and notably that of misinformation, because I cannot help but feel this entire proposal has been blighted by more misinformation than many other tasks that the council's pursued. Perhaps a little on mainstream media, certainly on social media, and maybe by political opponents seeking to further their own campaigns, has contributed to sort of, I wouldn't dare use the word fib, but certainly misinforming the public. And I think that's unfortunate. Because I've been contacted by a number of people who are absolutely convinced that we intend to close the properties, sell them off, and relocate. And I even had one person tell me that they know that's not what it says in the report, but that's what it clearly means. And you think, well, how on earth they can come to that view can only be because somebody sowed the seed of an idea in their minds. And I'm deeply saddened by that. I think that the key thing that is being proposed is the merger of the governance, and I think the governance is key, along with the leadership and the staff, notably that of the head teacher. But I think we're forgetting that governors change anyway. Not very many years ago, I was a governor, indeed, at Cogan Nursery School for a little over a year, and for various reasons I then gave that up. So the governors change, and the continuity is sustained by the policies and other directions, and all that we're talking about doing is transferring the governance to another centre of excellence, the corresponding primary school. So I'm saddened that people have got that misinformation there. I'm also concerned that there seems to be this idea that the nurseries will only be able to function in special isolation, and yet, as the Deputy Leader spelt out, the foundation phase spans the nursery year and the first 2 years in the primary school. And therefore, if anything, this is more likely to ensure greater continuity in what and dare I say, following the same curriculum, which I think can only be of benefit. And I've also had people tell me about that they're convinced that the educational standards for nursery age children will drop as a result of this merger. And I have to say that implies a considerable slur to all the other primary schools who work perfectly well and are producing perfectly adequate, if not just as good, results. So I am really saddened by some of that misinformation. I do hope that people will take the trouble to read the report and all the appendices and all the rest, because I think everything that has been said is documented and explained and defended. It's just that, unfortunately, it hasn't always been reported quite so accurately by others. So I'm at the moment minded to support this. I will await the Deputy Leader's recommendations.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, I'd like to echo some of the points you made. I felt like as if I was a bit distracted. I was trying to deal with something else. But in essence, you know, we've been through this on several occasions. A modern point. So is scrutiny. Scrutiny has looked at this on several occasions, and I think despite the fact that this is a comprehensive report, there are still misunderstandings out there, or possibly misleading people misleading the situation, because to say that you can't have a nursery school going through to primary is seems to me to be against the odds. It's something which we've done elsewhere, something which we've done in my own area of Cadoxton. You know, I was as I said before in this meeting, I used to be a governor of when it was a primary school, when it was a junior school, and when it was a nursery. And then I was on when it was a primary school and a nursery, and now the nursery's together with the school, and it's working seamlessly. And that is the point of education. And I think, and I'm glad you made the point about curriculum, Peter, because that's important too. Because as long as if you need seamless transition from nursery to the primary sector, where there is an overlap, there's a tremendous overlap, then that curriculum needs to be correct too. And you can do that when you have one set of management, one set of governors. I see absolutely nothing wrong with this, and the misinformation that these schools are going to close, the nurseries are going to close, is just false. And I don't understand why people listen to the falsities without actually listening to the facts. So I will be supporting this recommendation. I don't know if you want to come back, Liz.
Yes, I was just waiting for everyone to do it. Hang on. Somebody's just decided to phone me, so I'm putting my buzzing phone to one side. I think I just want to make one extra comment before I came to recommendations as well. And I think it's worthwhile reflecting back on the submissions of the two governing bodies, the governing body of Cogan Primary and the governing body of Evenlode Primary, both of whom stated very, very clearly that they value the expertise and the experience and the culture of the two nursery schools, and that they would want to support that going forward. I don't think that we can get any clearer statement from those two schools that they would be supportive not only of the nurseries, but of the children within them who would be coming into their care in any case within 12 to 18 months. And you know, I'm fairly used to people saying, oh no, she's wrong, but actually I value the input of the governing bodies of those two schools. And you know, I think that holds a lot of sway, and I hope that people go back and read what those two governing bodies have said as we move forward. But Lida, you wanted to come back in.
Yeah, I wanted to. Well, I was going to come in after you made the recommendations, because I think recommendation 3 might be changed, might need to be changed, and I will make a recommendation at that stage.
Right. Well, if I'll go through the first ones and then I'll pause and you can come in if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So the recommendations are, firstly, that Cabinet considers the findings of the objection report on the proposal, and I'm from everyone's comments, I'm content that we have. 2, subject to consideration of the above, Cabinet approves the implementation of the proposal to reconfigure nursery provision in Penarth by Proposal 1 to amalgamate Bute Cottage Nursery School and Evenlode Primary School by changing the lowest age range of pupils at Evenlode Primary School from 4 to 3 and include 96 part-time nursery places, increasing the capacity of Evenlode Primary School to accommodate the 96 part-time nursery places, and discontinuing Bute Cottage Nursery School and transferring all staff and pupils of the nursery phase, and this is the important bit, under the governance of Evenlode Primary School from September 2022. And similarly, Proposal 2 is to amalgamate Cogan Nursery School and Cogan Primary School by changing the lowest age range of pupils at Cogan Primary School from 4 to 3 to include 96 part-time places. Secondly, increasing the capacity of Cogan Primary School to accommodate the 96 part-time places, and discontinuing Cogan Nursery School and transferring all staff and pupils of the nursery phase under the governance of Cogan Primary School from September 2022. And I reiterate, both will operate on their existing sites. And recommendation 3, Lee, do you wanted to come in on that, Faye?
I do. I do want to come in on. It's a technical point, and that's the reason I was distracted, to be honest. In order for the written recommendation of the use of Section 1414 of the Council Constitution, there has to be an agreement from the chair of the scrutiny committee that that is acceptable. It's my understanding that the chairman has not signed that off. Now, that being the case, and the fact that the last Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee was last week, that we don't have one between now and the elections, and the fact that this has been to scrutiny, I think, at least twice.
Has been twice, yes.
Yes, has been twice, and there's been an agreement at the Scrutiny Committee that this is the right way to go forward, coupled with the fact that this has to take place from September 2022, I am making a recommendation that we delete the recommendation as written down, and that we replace it with that Cabinet request the Managing Director to use his emergency powers in order for this report to be endorsed to ensure that it can take effect from September 2022. Now, I don't know whether or not the monitoring officer wants to make any comment, but clearly, unless something like that is done, then when it would need to be called in, or it could be called in, but we can't use 1414 without the agreement of the chair of the scrutiny committee. So we could leave it as it is and wait and see if it's possibly called in. But if it is called in, I have absolutely no idea what it could be dealt with, because it has to be dealt with within 20 days of call in. And because of the election, it is impossible to call a scrutiny committee within 20 days because they will not be in place, because the annual meeting is not until, I think, the 26th of May. So bearing that in mind, I think in order for this to go through, and the fact that it's been to scrutiny on several occasions, and the fact it has to be from September 2022, we have no alternative but to request the Managing Director use his emergency powers to enact it. I can see that Debbie, our monitoring officer, is on screen, and I would like to have her opinion, if I could, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I think you've comprehensively covered all of the concerns that I would have shared. I mean, certainly it has been before scrutiny committee. It's been mentioned on a couple of occasions. The timelines are such that, and as set out in the report, that a decision on the objections needs to be within a specified timeline. But we are in a unique situation insofar as we have the local government elections in 3.5 weeks' time, or there or thereabouts. And as you've rightly pointed out, the last ordinary scrutiny committee for learning and culture was last week. And I am concerned with the ability to have another scrutiny committee and then to come back to Cabinet, and it's these types of scenarios that we would ordinarily look to the Chief Executive to use his emergency powers, request him to do so, and I think in the circumstances that is the appropriate way forward. So yes, I'd concur with that stance.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you, Monitoring Officer. In that case, I will absolutely propose those recommendations. I don't know if anybody's got any comments.
So if you're proposing them, I'm happy to second.
Good. Well, I'm happy to do it, particularly as we've had advice from the monitoring officer, because I think is the only way forward. Because I think it's just a delaying tactic, with all due respects. and we're in an election period, and I do not like people playing politics with children's education. And I'll say that formally and on record. So, good, thank you. If anybody's got any other comments to make, if not, we move on. Thank you. The next item is item 14, which is the proposed events programme for 22-23. You're on mute.
I know I'm juggling two monitors and I'm not making well of it, am I? Yes, this is the an update for Cabinet on the 2021-22 events programme and looking forward to 2022-23. Yeah, it was a strange old year last year that we were still in coronavirus, and we looked at doing some things differently, both so that people could be out and about safely, but also so that we tried some new venues, and we did a lot more in terms of activities and events in our town centres to support them because they'd had such a difficult time. So, going forward, we are, we'd had an awful lot of events cancelled. They will start to come back. Some of the ones that that are run by other people, various sort of duathlons, triathlons, and I think Gwyl Row, that sort of thing. But looking at this going forward for this year, there is still a need to be mindful that COVID is still with us, and we still need to exercise a bit of caution going forward. So we will still have events out and about on coasts, in country parks, that sort of thing. But I think it's still very necessary to have events in our town centres to support them. It's been such a difficult time for many of our town centres and the shops and businesses within them. And I think Cabinet will share my disappointment that we've heard recently of the closure of a very long-standing and much loved business in Barry's High Street. We wish the owner and the staff well, but it brings it right home to us that such a prominent business has closed. It demonstrates the vulnerability of our town centres, and with our regeneration work, with our transforming towns agenda, etc., we'll be doing that. But I think it's right that the events programme reflects that and seeks to support that as well. So the actual information is included in the appendix, and it's fairly straightforward. As I said, this is very much a sort of a business as usual type report for us in terms of what we do with events. And so the recommendations are very straightforward in that Cabinet considers and approves the proposed events for the year 2022-23, which are in Appendix A, subject to current legislation in place at that time. We have to say that just in case everything goes a bit pear-shaped again. And that the head of regeneration and planning be granted delegated powers in consultation with the Cabinet member for education regeneration to implement changes to the events programme to respond to the changing environment governed by COVID-19 in future months. And 3, because some of these need to be up and running and going ahead, that use of the urgent decision procedure as set out in section 1414 of the Council's constitution is exercised in order to allow the Council to prepare and develop the related events. And I'd so move. I think you're on mute, Leader.
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you. Trying to unmute myself desperately. Is there anybody else got any comments? Because clearly this is business as usual in many respects, but we need to get on and ensure that we can have some events during the summer. So the use of 1414. Ben would like to come in, sorry.
Yeah, I'll formally second Liz's report, and I think that everything we can do as a council to promote innovative new ways of engaging people and spreading those events as wide as we can across the county borough is really important, and everything that we do should be to encourage greater involvement of our citizens and visitors in activities that can inspire them. So really excited, and for the future events that are coming up in various places, including Barry Island. Looking forward to going along to them. But yeah, so happy to second the report. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. In that case, we'll move on to agenda item 15. Ben, I think this is yours, recommissioning of independent advocacy services to children and young people.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, indeed, this is a report to do with the recommissioning of independent advocacy services to children and young people. The purpose of this report is to seek this Cabinet approval to undertake a recommissioning exercise and to enter into a contract for delivery of independent advocacy services to children and young people. Berwick Glamorgan Council and Cardiff Council awarded a contract for independent professional advocacy services to the National Youth Advocacy Service, NYAS, NYAS, in 2017 for a period of 5 years. This contract is due to lapse on the 30th of September 2022. Therefore, a decision is required so that the procurement exercise can take place to award a new contract by July 2022. You may recall from talking about the Court Parenting Panel minutes earlier, NIAS was mentioned in terms of the pledges relating to valuing people's belongings. The service they provide is really crucial and helps us give young people a voice, and they have an advocate on their side to help them through all of the conversations they may have difficulty understanding what's going on, but also sometimes they can identify solutions which sometimes it's just not possible in some of the initial conversations that are being had around issues. And it is a separate piece that Court Parenting Panel have received reports on before, and it's always one which is really warmly received by members. Some of the outcomes for children looked after have been fantastic as a result of the work being done there. So in terms of moves to recommendations, there are 3 recommendations. I'll just read those out. It is recommended the Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Social Services in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health. 2, following the completion of the tender process, award the contract or contracts for this service for an initial period of 4 years with an option to extend for up to a further 2 years. Recommendation 2 is recommended that Cabinet delegates authority to the Director of Social Services to seek authority from the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services to execute a contract with the successful bidder. And it's recommended, under item 3, recommended that Cabinet agrees to the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services developing and entering into a partnership agreement with Cardiff Council regarding the commissioning processes for this service. This is one which we do in partnership with them. So with those recommendations, I so move and hope you will support the report.
Okay, I don't know if everybody has got any comments. No, in that case we do. Thank you. I will formally second if no one else does.
Thank you very much.
Next item is again disclosure of buying services.
Yeah, I believe I'm taking this one, Chair.
Yes. Yeah.
In terms of this, obviously my position within the council as the champion for safeguarding is the primary reason I'm putting this forwards for discussion, and the purpose of this report is to seek agreement from Cabinet to recommend that the council change the existing disclosure and barring service, I'll refer to it now as DBS, arrangements in relation to DBS checks for certain elected members to ensure clarity in respect of expectations of elected members in the Berwick and Glamorgan, building on public trust and confidence. DBS guidance for school governors and elected councillors in Wales provides limited direction for councillors in relation to requiring elected members to undergo DBS checks, but I think it's really important that we set a standard for the upcoming new slate of councillors as we move forwards. Currently, there are 2 recommendations on this report that I'll read out to you now. 1, that Cabinet determines that elected members of Cabinet, the Healthy Living and Social Care, Homes and Safe Communities and Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committees and members who are in receipt of a senior salary, so that's any other chairs or indeed group leaders who have that senior salary, cabinet members, will be required to apply for an enhanced DBS check. 2, the cabinet determines that all elected members, upon taking up appointment, will also complete a basic DBS check. I think it's really important that the public have a level of confidence in those that are elected to represent them, and I'm sure that every person who's elected after the election in May will be more than happy to do this, but I think it's really important we lay out our requirements there. I do feel, Leader, sorry to land this on you, that we may well need a third recommendation in respect of delegating authority to the Monetary Officer Head of Democratic Services to actually enact this ahead of the upcoming, but maybe there's some wording there that I can spring on Debbie now that would make sense. But I think without the recommendation to actually delegate that authority, I don't know where this goes from here. But I think that there's always been a tension in understanding how do we assure the public that as a council we are on top of understanding requirements when there are a wide range of challenges throughout safeguarding in society, and it's important that as councillors, particularly those with a policy responsibility that puts them in the chance of closer contact with those of a more vulnerable nature, that we have given actually some help to those members by making sure that they can have that enhanced DBS check. So I do think the third recommendation will be a fairly standard one, which is around how we delegate authority to the Monetary Officer Head of Democratic Legal Services to enact this change for the upcoming administration. But perhaps, Leader, you might want to jump in at that point.
No, I think I must admit you're right, because this I think you probably need to delegate the way in which this is addressed to an officer, and I'm going to ask Debbie if she wants to go back in again. I apologise.
Not at all. Yes, I think you're absolutely right. It needs to be delegated to a lead officer, whether that's myself or Tracy Dickinson, but happy for my name to be assigned to this, and I can call on the support from my other colleagues to assist. So yes, absolutely, I'm happy to pick that one up.
So I think for clarity of the minutes, I think it would be in terms of a normal delegation that we'd have in a recommendation for the purposes of minuting, not to be list out all the words here and now, but I think we have one in place where we do delegate it to yourself,
absolutely, to basically implement the recommendations 1 and 2, or the earlier recommendations.
Yes,
so
the recommendations 1 and 2 will be implemented in conjunction with a delegated authority to the Monetary. Yeah, in conjunction with delegate authority to Monetary Officer Head of Legal Democratic Services to deal with it. I don't know what the word is. Absolutely. I'll play around with the words, but I think as far as the meeting's concerned, we're clear in this spirit. So yeah, I'll make sure that's actioned.
Apologies to land that on you as I was rereading it ahead of reporting. I thought it was important to have that there. But I think, it is also worth saying whenever we talk about DBS checks, that is never the be all and end all of safeguarding work. And it's really important that everybody is mindful of how they act and how they deal with situations and the positions they put themselves into. So the majority of occasions, councillors are not in a position to be alone with vulnerable people. They're working, they're going into schools on visits, maybe they also act as governors, and as was noted in the report, there are policies that overarch the recommendations around DBS checks for governors, and it's trying to take the spirit of those, and where governors in schools have particular responsibility for safeguarding, they have extra checks. That we are moving to this position with this report, and I think it's a really positive step forward, and one which a number of members have been questioning about in various scrutiny meetings as we've had annual reports on safeguarding going forward. So I think this is a really positive step for the new council after May to take.
No, I agree, and to be honest, it was something that I championed the previous administration. The one before the last one even. Well, we needed it, but I think just for clarity, because one of the things that probably needs to be said is that this is a protection for all councillors, on the basis that if you're a councillor, you sometimes hold the surgery, you may be on your own. You don't know who's going to walk through the door, or alternatively, you have a phone call from somebody who says, please can you come and see me, I have a problem, and you go and see them, and you are on your own with somebody, and you are therefore vulnerable, and therefore this is a protection for the individual councillor per se, and I think that's important too. So I think it's the right way forward, and I concur with what you're saying, and I'm happy to second the recommendations as amended.
Sorry, can I just
Okay, is everybody happy with that?
Sorry, Leader, can I just check something in terms of recommendation 2? Just to double check in terms of the wording for that. You're obviously using the head of monitoring and legal services now. Is that in terms of delegations of powers?
The delegation of powers would be a new recommendation 3 to delegate the powers to the monitoring officer, head of legal and democratic services, to enact the recommendations 1 and 2.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leader.
Okay. Next item is item 17. Have I got anything that's urgent? I do not, but I do have an item under part 2, and I will, as we have items under part 2 of the agenda, we're following the earlier reports. There are matters which are considered confidential for a particular reason. We need to move into private session, into part 2, where confidential matters can be discussed. Therefore, I will ask the Cabinet Officer, after somebody's moved part 2, obviously, the Cabinet Officer to stop the recording of this open session and ensure that no members of the public are present after this juncture, and that only allow the relevant parties to remain to hear the details of the items to be discussed. Following the meeting, obviously, the outcome of part 2 discussions will be formally captured as part of the minutes of the meeting, advising all parties of the final decision of the Cabinet for this item. Having said that, the formal procedure, I will now move part 2, and I hope somebody will second it.
I'll second, Peter.
Thank you. And can I ask the officer to stop the recording and also tell us when the live streaming has stopped, please?